The global American empire is indeed very powerful, but it is not original in its strategy to subvert other nations. It uses the same playbook every time, a strategy that the British began using long before. First, they identify a target country. They then begin spinning the wheels of propaganda through the mainstream media and the institutions with half-truths, lies, and slander to shape public opinion in favor of their agenda, i.e., regime change. As this is happening, NGOs such as Open Societies and the National Endowment of Democracy, just to name a few, support and fund opposition groups within the country in question in order to stoke tensions and create instability. They'll accuse the government of human rights abuses, being undemocratic, tyrannical, a threat to neighboring countries, and regional peace, blah blah blah. It's always the same. Why? Because it works. People buy into this. Why wouldn't they? On the surface, these things sound bad, so it's an easy sell. And of course, the media only confirms these claims. Therefore, they must be true, right? The narrative is created by think tanks, such as Chatham House and the Council on Foreign Relations, and then promulgated into academia and government as the story circulates through all the institutions and trickles down through the echelons and into the mind of the general population, which is reinforced by the bought and paid for mainstream media, creating a nationwide feedback loop. So we have this three-pronged attack: media, academia, and politics, all singing from the same hymn sheet, chanting regime change. Now, depending on how strong the regime in question is, will determine how many of these steps are required to achieve the end goal. If it's a weak regime in some banana republic, it may only take a few violent protests by funded opposition groups to overthrow the government. However, if the leadership is strong and has support from the majority of the population, then it may take a little more persuasion, perhaps some extra interference, and the arming of opposition groups in order to create further unrest or even a civil war. Either way, chaos is always the objective. And if that doesn't work, it's time for the big guns and a little shock and awe with some bombs of democracy. Now, how can they, the aggressors, maintain the image of the defenders of peace and democracy whilst trying to instigate war? They can't be seen to start any kind of conflict, or they would lose credibility and public support would dwindle. So the answer is to get the regime in question to fire the first shot. How do they do this? Provocation. Relentless provocation. To the point where they back their opponent into a corner and leave them with no alternative. And once the first shot is fired, all bets are off, and the precondition for war is set, giving the American deep state establishment the green light to commence their hostilities on the basis of justified retaliation against an out-of-control, despotic regime that must be removed and replaced with a democratic and human rights-loving, friendly government. So does this sound familiar? How many times have we seen this before? The Russo-Ukrainian War is just the latest in a long history of engineered wars going all the way back to the First World War. Yes, that's right. Back then it was, of course, Britain that was working quietly behind the scenes to instigate a war against Germany. Of course, it wasn't the visible government in Parliament, but a shadowy group of very powerful elites who lied and manipulated for years, resulting in that devastating war. Much like today, it is definitely not the American president or even his entourage that are making the decisions. They simply read scripts handed to them by their paymasters, who remain hidden from the public, effectively giving themselves not only diplomatic immunity, but outright freedom from any kind of accountability. If things go south, the blame lies with their useful idiot politicians, who will take the fall on their behalf. This is why we have a deep state with unknown yet powerful individuals who can steer the ship from a distance and remain visibly clean. These are not elected persons. Now, let's apply this model to the last 100 years of conflicts we have witnessed. We need not look very far. It's happening right now with Russia. If we are to believe the official narrative, Putin is Hitler, and Russia is the aggressive, warmongering nation that threatens world peace and stability. The invasion of Ukraine was completely unprovoked, and as Putin seeks to rebuild the Russian Empire, he's just a power-hungry, despotic tyrant with no regard for human life or dignity. Ironically, the accusations thrown at the country and/or regime in question are precisely what the American establishment is guilty of. So not only are these untrue, but it is in fact the very opposite, making it a grotesque display of absolute hypocrisy and injustice. It is complete projection. So where else can we observe this? Let's see. Just in the last 25 years, we've got Iraq, Libya, Syria, Serbia, and Yemen, to name a few where war was unleashed. Then there are many others in Africa and Latin America where regime change took place more easily, but still using the same strategy. The same lies and slander we are seeing today being thrown at President Putin were used against Saddam Hussein, Colonel Gaddafi, Bashar al-Assad, Slobodan Milosevic, and just about every other so-called tyrant in the last 120 years, going all the way back to Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany prior to World War I, when the UK was secretly maneuvering all of Europe into a war with Germany. Prussian militarism, German imperialism, authoritarianism. The Kaiser was a bloodthirsty dictator with ambitions of building an empire that would rival that of the British, and he wanted to take over Europe and impose Germany's will on the freedom-loving populations, if we are to believe the British media of the time. He was a threat to the free world and must be stopped. A threat to British banking interests, more like. It was all hysteria made up by the British media, academia, and government, just like today with Putin. Not one of these accusations made against the Kaiser were true. Germany had an empire, sure, so did Britain, and most other major powers in Europe, but Germany hadn't started any wars whatsoever. What about the Franco-Prussian War? Yeah, that was France that started it. Germany acted in self-defense as they absolutely destroyed the French army in just 6 weeks, which stunned the British establishment as they watched Germany become the industrial and military powerhouse of Europe and begin building their own empire. Of course, being the global hegemon of the day, Britain felt threatened and sought ways of overcoming what they saw as a new menace. Rather than seek some kind of alliance or cooperation, London wanted to eliminate Germany. The mindset of the Anglo is all or nothing. There is no sharing or compromising. The greed is too strong. Hence the behavior of the USA today. They do not want a multipolar world. They want everything under their control, and the rest of the world can be damned. This seems to be purely an Anglo mindset. The French had a very large empire, as did Russia, the Netherlands, and others. But none of them ever sought to outright dominate the world. Sure, they fought each other, but it was understood that the world was a big place and must be shared. But no, greed manifesting in the city of London was unstoppable, to the point where they were willing to throw away millions of lives, as DC is and has been since it assumed the role of global hegemon. Other regimes have managed to resist until now, notably Iran, which one could argue has been in a state of war with the USA since the revolution of 1979, when they threw off the yoke of American control, making them one of the few truly independent countries, along with North Korea, Venezuela, Russia, Belarus, and Syria. Oh, and look, just by pure coincidence, all these countries are treated as mortal enemies of America. I just can't understand why. I mean, doesn't the USA want all countries to be free and independent? Isn't that what America stands for? All we ever hear is the word freedom and other buzzwords. No, America wants global control over all nations. They must all bend the knee and adopt liberal values. They must have freedom forced upon them, so they're allowed to be free as long as they submit to the demands of Washington, D.C. Anyway, this playbook was actually handed down from Britain to the United States during and immediately after World War II, when the reins of power pivoted from London to D.C. Prior to 1941, it was Britain that was playing the role of world police, as they sought to maintain and grow their empire for the benefit of the top echelons of power. So we can see the same entity that is in charge of D.C. today was running things back then, over 100 years ago, from London. Okay, it's not the same individuals, of course they're all gone now, but it's the same spirit and mindset. Pax Britannia became Pax Americana. All or nothing, total world control, no compromise, lighting fires,
I'm a fire starter, twisted fire starter,
and destroying nations that refuse to comply. So the real despots are ruling over us in the collective West.
Are we the baddies?
Yes, the Anglo-American global empire has been run and ruled by evil, shadowy men the entire time. They were never the good guys, no matter what history says. So I think you may see where I'm going with this, but that is for another discussion in another video. Until next time.